And I hope we have once again reminded people that man is not free unless government is limited. There's a clear cause and effect here that is as neat and predictable as a law of physics. As government expands, liberty contracts.
From this day forward, it's going to be only America first. America first.
Well, there you are. It's 11 April 2024. This is the Liberty Podcast presented by Proven Arms and Outfitters, specializing in rifles, pistols, tactical gear, and more. Learn more at ProvenOutfitters.com. By the way, I am so grateful for the many of you who tell me that you watch and enjoy the podcast. I would also like to ask you very humbly to make sure that you share the links from our YouTube channel each week with all of your friends who would appreciate our quick recap of some of the hot button issues of the day. And we'll keep delivering them. And we just want to grow that audience, and we need your help to do that. So please do what you can to spread the word about the podcast. All right, let's get to it. Senator Ted Budd of North Carolina was in the news this week because he finally stepped up, along with two other co-sponsors, to author a bill, which he has designed in an effort to finally address these Americans, among others, who are being held hostage still by Hamas after the attacks of last October 7th, in which they slaughtered well north of 1,200 people. And as if that's bad enough, we still have these hostages, we hope, who are alive. We don't really know in every case. And Senator Budd, perhaps a little bit overdue, has introduced a bill. Simultaneously, they had several family members testify in Congress this week, including the wife of a man who has roots to Chapel Hill, North Carolina, who has been held hostage at age 64 now for these 6 months. But let's talk a little bit about Senator Budd's bill. He said in a floor speech in conjunction with the rollout of the bill, seeking the release of the hostages demands strength and moral clarity. We demand it of our own leaders, and we should require it from our major allies. The state of Qatar hosts Hamas's leadership in their capital of Doha. That's where they live high on the hog, all these Hamas overlords, eating caviar and drinking champagne while all the hell is breaking loose in the Middle East, in Israel. Now, initially, Qatari officials claimed they are exercising leverage on Hamas. Then they publicly stated thereafter that they have no leverage. And now they're promoting a ceasefire regardless of the release of hostages. In other words, there can be no ceasefire on either side until there's clarity on how these hostages are going to get out. And by the way, there's 130 of them altogether. We hope that they're all alive from all over the world. I believe 20 nations in total. The truth is that Qatar does have significant leverage over Hamas, Senator Budd says. They have the ability to expel these terrorists if they don't release the hostages or at least engage in reasonable negotiations. In other words, they can kick the Hamas bigwigs out of their country and tell them to go find somewhere else to spend their ill-gotten gains, which is what they have. The truth is that Hamas is not interested in releasing the hostages, and Qatar seems equally uninterested in forcing them to do so. It is time that we hold nations like Qatar accountable for their dithering and their stalling. The time for talking is over, and the time for action is now. If we don't see action, then Qatar must face consequences, At the end of the day, this bill represents another step towards securing the freedom of our fellow Americans. Now, I have to say that this is a very noble first step by Senator Budd, and where Tom Tillis has been, the senior NC senator, I can't tell you on this issue, other than the occasional sort of empty tweets about various topics that he seems to be good at doing. But let's talk a little about the human toll, the reality of these people. These are real lives of real people who have been shattered, and they're rotting away as hostages as we speak. Let's talk about the 6. They're worth naming, and we need to talk about them. Who are they? They're people who we need to think about and pray for daily. Okay. By the way, in his State of the Union message recently, President Biden nary uttered a word about these folks. What a coward. I guarantee you this, I think I can guarantee this, and you'll agree with me. If this was a Trump administration in the White House right now, these people would not be hostages, and they certainly would not be hostages 6 months after the fact. And furthermore, the Wall Street Journal reporter being detained by Russia for the last year plus, he too would be home by now. I guarantee it. Okay, here's who's held hostage right now. And you'll note there's a trend here. 5 of the 6 are very young people. Eden Alexander, 19, recently graduated from New Jersey's Tenafly High School in the New York City metropolitan area. He was volunteering to serve in the Israeli army after graduating from high school. How about that? Itay Chen, 19, a soldier in the Israeli military, is also a hostage. Itay is a dual U.S.-Israeli citizen who had been serving in a tank unit near the border with Gaza when the terrorists invaded on October 7th. Omer Nutra, 22. He turned 22 days after the October 7 attack. He was born in New York City's Manhattan borough. He had deferred studying at Binghamton University for just a year to join the Israeli military. Authorities believe his entire Israeli unit was taken hostage. Omer is the grandson of Holocaust survivors. Hirsch Goldberg Poland, age 23. Not only is he a hostage, his arm was blown off from the elbow down before he was captured and driven off, his mom has told CNN. He was attending that music festival going on in Israel when the terrorists arrived on the scene and just swooped in and killed and then took hostage all these unarmed, innocent young people at this music festival. Hirsch was born in Berkeley, California, and moved with his family to Jerusalem when he was 7 years old. So that was about 15 years ago, I guess. Then there is Sagwe Dekel Chen, age 35, a resident of a well-known kibbutz in Israel. He first helped his family into a safe room on the day in question, October 7. When the terrorists arrived, he took them to the safe room. Then he went out to fight them in hand-to-hand combat. He is a native of and was raised in Bloomfield, Connecticut. And then last but certainly not least, Keith Siegel, age 64, a native of Chapel Hill, North Carolina, moved to Israel in his 20s and is a career occupational therapist. His wife, Aviva, was also taken hostage on October 7th, but thankfully was released in November, and she was one of 3 Americans who testified before Congress the other day, begging them to finally take some legitimate steps to bring these people home. Sadly, 2 other Americans who had been taken hostage, Judith and Gadai Haggai, both died while being held hostage. They are in their 70s. Now, just so you have a little bit of further context, I did a quick review of some of the other folks who from other countries who are being held hostage. And you know what's really disturbing, and I don't think this is talked enough about either, is the age of some of these hostages. Shlomo Mansour, 85, a chicken coop manager, was taken captive from his kibbutz, which is a neighborhood or community where he lived and worked. His wife managed to escape. Amiram Cooper, 85, and his wife Nurit, 80, were taken from their home, according to their daughter-in-law. On Monday, October 23, Nurit was one of 2 women released, but 85-year-old Amiram is still held hostage. Oded Lifshitz, 83, and his wife Yocheved, 85, were taken hostage. She was also among the 2 women released on October 23. So far, I've ticked off the names of 3 80-year-olds who are still held by Hamas. Avraham Munder, 78, was kidnapped from his kibbutz. His wife, Ruthie, daughter, and grandson have since been released, but 78-year-old Mr. Munder still there. Gadai Moses, 79, also abducted, according to relatives. And an aid agency where he worked as an agricultural expert, 79 years old. He's still a hostage. Yoram Metzger, 80 years old, has diabetes and broke his hip 6 months ago. Wonder how that's working out for him. Meanwhile, any number of hostages have died. Tamir Adar, 38, an Israeli-Romanian. Tal Chamai, 41. So, and I could go on. There's a long list of names here, probably a dozen or more, who have died since being taken hostage, which means that they were taken hostage after more than likely suffering very serious injuries, wounds during the attacks. So they were taken hostage when they should have been taken to hospitals. But of course, terrorists don't do that, do they? That's why they're terrorists. Okay, here's something you need to keep an eye on. We won't belabor this point, but it is worth keeping an eye on because it really ties in to this whole problem with illegal immigration and the fact that more of these kind of terrorists, like we see at work in Hamas, are in our country now. They've come across our border by the millions. And guess what? In North Carolina, a lot of our sheriffs have not been compelled to let the immigration authorities, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, aka ICE, when they can't confirm that someone is a citizen, some of these sheriffs are like, well, it's not my problem. But here's a report by the Raleigh News and Observer, and I say we won't belabor this, but keep an eye on this. After 6 years of trying to force local law enforcement in some of the state's most populous counties to cooperate with immigration authorities, North Carolina Republicans are on the cusp of passing legislation to do so. Legislation that passed the House last year is expected to be taken up by the state Senate when lawmakers return to Raleigh at the end of this month. If it becomes law, House Bill 10 will require all 100 sheriffs in the state to notify ICE if they can't determine the legal status of a person charged with certain high-level offenses, crimes. The bill would also require sheriffs to honor requests by ICE to hold people it believes are in the country illegally for up to 48 hours to give federal agents time to take them into custody. This is a no-brainer. These sheriffs should all be working hand in glove with the ICE authorities to get these people in custody and the heck out of here. Do you want them wandering around our state? Do you want these sheriffs in some of these lefty counties like Mecklenburg, where the guy was elected sheriff and the first day he was on the job, he rescinded any laws on his books that would have required his sheriffs to detain these illegal scumbags who have come into our country. All right, now, this is another thing that might sound a little bit in the weeds, but again, it has to do with national security, and so it's important to focus on it. Remember, during the Trump administration, it came to light that the very corrupt intelligence and law enforcement communities in our country had abused something called the FISA warrant process to conduct warrantless investigations on some of the people in Trump's universe, in his orbit, to try, and in some cases successfully, to charge them with all kinds of, sort of sketchy offenses and crimes, right? So we know what they did with the FISA provisions, okay? Here we go. This is from the Brennan Center for Justice. With Section 702, which is where the FISA provisions are contained, set to expire on April 19, so that's in about a week, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson has scheduled a vote this coming week. In fact, it took place, was supposed to take place yesterday, the 10th of April, on the Reforming Intelligence and Securing America Act. Despite its name, the bill is not a serious reform proposal, says the Brennan Center. Among many other defects, the bill does not contain a warrant requirement for backdoor searches, meaning improper searches. And the modifications it does make, such as codifying the FBI's recent internal rule changes, would do nothing to prevent the intelligence agency's pervasive abuses of Americans' Fourth Amendment rights under Section 702. So it is critical that members amend this bill to include necessary safeguards for Americans. So what happened on the 10th of April? Once again, Speaker Mike Johnson, who's turning out to be a big disappointment to conservatives on the Hill, he tries to ram through the re-extension of 702, and guess what happens? 19 Republican congressmen paying attention to what a sham this is and how dangerous these provisions are for innocent Americans. 19 of them stood up and said, no, we're not voting for this. We're going to stop this dead in its tracks, including the always reliable patriot, North Carolina Congressman Dan Bishop, along with his fellow Freedom Caucus patriots like Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert, the people who we've come to rely on to stand in the breach. Unfortunately, there are never enough of them. By the way, our congressman in NC9, once again, Richard Hudson, was AWOL on standing with Dan Bishop on this matter, and was perfectly happy to let Mike Johnson do whatever he wanted to do, because that's the way it usually goes. The House of Representatives was set to vote on whether to reauthorize Section 702, which expires, as I said, on the 19th. The controversial law is unique, but the ways intelligence agencies have abused it to violate civil liberties are not. The solution to this problem is familiar. Congress must not renew Section 702 without protecting Americans' Fourth Amendment rights by requiring the government to get a warrant before reviewing Americans' private communications. I mean, that is the basis of our system in this country. Warrantless searches and investigations are simply not tolerated. Lax rules adopted by these agencies allow intelligence officials to perform backdoor searches whenever they have reason to believe the query will return foreign intelligence or for the FBI evidence of a crime. Given FISA's capacious definition of foreign intelligence, I think I said that wrong, capacious, which means sketchy definition of what constitutes foreign intelligence. It's a very broad definition. This low bar should be easy to clear, but officials have repeatedly stumbled over it. Government reports indicate that in 2022, the FBI performed close to 4,000 backdoor searches that violated even its own permissive rules. In another recent one-year period, the FBI violated the rules governing searches of FISA databases. Wait for this, 278,000 times. 278,000 times they violated their own rules governing searches of databases. All right, so we're going to keep an eye on this. We're going to see what happens because right now it's kind of come to a grinding halt, which is a good thing because it would be just as well if this whole thing lapses on April 19th. And if it's not going to lapse, then it needs to be part of a major revision that protects American citizens from these scoundrels. Look, if you're wearing a MAGA hat, where's my MAGA hat? It's back there somewhere, isn't it? I guess I forgot to bring it out today. If you're wearing a MAGA hat, if you're in any way connected to the MAGA movement, conservatism, Donald Trump, that makes you a target for all these agencies. We've seen what they do. We've seen what they do. And we're going to talk about a new book that just came out, which gets into the rise of the MAGA movement in this country. All right, I want to talk to you now about a topic that the White House and the Marxist Democrats and the media would just as soon ignore, because they had us convinced, they thought, that this whole concern about inflation and high prices in our everyday lives was just a bunch of talking points from the right that had no basis in reality. Well, guess what? Once again, they lied. All right? Wall Street Journal, April 11th. So much for the triumph over inflation, writes the editorial board. The Consumer Price Index came in hot for the third straight month in March, confirming what most Americans understand, even if Washington and the press prefer to obsess over abortion laws in Arizona. Yeah, that's another distraction. The CPI, the Consumer Price Index, rose 0.4% in March for the second month in a row. So it was up 0.4 in March, up 0.4 in February, and increased 0.3% in January. 3 months is more than a blip in the data, and the price index for the last 12 months has now climbed back to a 3.5%. Shelter, meaning, the cost of living in your house, the utilities, all the bills we pay every month. Shelter and gasoline contributed more than half of the increase in March, which causes some analysts to dismiss the CPI rebound. But rent increases and gas prices are costs that consumers feel. President Biden claimed in a statement that wages are rising faster than prices, which is barely true over the last year, though not over the last 2 months. The real average hourly wage in constant dollars going back to 1982 was $11.11 in March, up from $11.04 a year earlier. 7 lousy cents, writes the Journal. Listen to this. Since Mr. Biden took office in January 2021, oh boy, what a day that was, average hourly earnings after inflation are down 2.54%. Fighting inflation remains my top economic priority, Mr. Biden declared. Who is he kidding? His real priority is to keep the government and consumer spending spigot wide open with subsidies for electronic vehicles, student loan write-offs, and social welfare programs. His other main priority is using regulations to put government in control of more of the economy. None of this restrains prices. Mr. Biden also took his usual turn blaming inflation on companies for raising prices, as if they don't have to cover their own rising costs to stay in business. He's never run anything. He doesn't understand basic economics. And then Biden blamed Republicans in Congress for wanting to slash taxes, as if that has anything to do with the price increases over the last 4 years. Yeah, of course. Corporate taxes are too high and he wants to make them higher. How's that going to affect prices? Are they going to go down? No, they're going to keep going up. This is basic stuff you learn in high school. Unbelievable. All right, I want to talk to you a little bit about, as we go out the door here on this beautiful April 11, you'll notice I've got a new enticing backdrop for you. I did a little technological research and discovered that I could easily share with you some of the beautiful sights and sounds of nature, although we've got the sounds muted, so you're not distracted from my dulcet tones. Also, I wanted to point out over here, where am I? Here. See this beautiful flag here? This is actually a handcrafted coin holder for those of you who collect those wonderful patriotic coins from various organizations, military institutions and law enforcement and whatnot. That beautiful piece of work was actually handcrafted by a member of the Pinehurst Police Department. And I was fortunate enough to be the winning bidder in an auction several years ago. And now that adorns my office. And I've never had the presence of mind to put it in the frame until today. And I just wanted to shout out to Officer Joe, who is a member of the Pinehurst Police Department and also is on duty every Sunday at the Village Chapel, just in case a crazy Democrat decided to come in and disrupt our worship services. Not out of the question. New book just coming out this week entitled Finish What We Started, The MAGA Movement's Ground War to End Democracy, by Washington Post national political reporter Isaac Arnsdorf. Now, you're going to say, well, what's with that subtitle? The War to End Democracy? That's a Democrat talking point. Well, I saw the author interviewed today earlier by Steve Bannon on his streaming incredible program, War Room. And Bannon acknowledges that he disagrees with that pretense that MAGA is trying to end democracy. That is a left-wing talking point. But he also acknowledges that in order for this Washington Post reporter to get a book published by a major publishing house that explores MAGA in a serious way and the growth of the Trump movement, that, there were going to be some concessions made to the left. And obviously that subtitle is one of them. However, Bannon urges you to order and read this book because what it really does is show how the influence of the MAGA movement has grown and what it's accomplishing, whether the left likes it or not. And this book lays it out for the first time ever. Inspired by Donald Trump's election lies. Now, this is the publisher's summary of the book. So you're going to see some things in here that you don't agree with because they're not true, and we believe in truth. Inspired by Donald Trump's election lies, a growing movement of grassroots activists mobilized around the country to pick up where the insurrection left off, which was January 6th. Again, arguably not even close to any kind of insurrection, but they got to use their strong language, okay? This movement laid the groundwork to succeed the next time where Trump had failed to keep himself in power. But their own success in taking over and purging the Republican Party became their undoing as it drove away moderates and supplied the Democrats with a winning message in the 22 midterms. Still, the MAGA Republicans proved uninterested in learning from that defeat. You're damn right. Only becoming more extreme and dead set on returning Trump to power. Yes, we are. Washington Post national political reporter Isaac Arnsdorf has spent years at the forefront of reporting on this growing movement. Drawing on extensive, exclusive on-the-ground reporting around the country and deepened by historical context, Arnsdorf has produced the defining journalistic account of the origins, evolution, and future, which there is a bright one, of the MAGA movement. Combining critical and rigorous reporting with the intimacy and complexity of a novel, this book is unlike any other in the decades since Donald Trump convulsed and transformed American politics. Now, again, the left wants you to take away from this that the convulsion and transformation of American politics has been a negative thing. Quite to the contrary, as we see in some of the examples I cited previously. We've still got these rhinos, these uniparty status quo Republicans in Washington, but gradually, with people like Dan Bishop and Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Chip Roy in Texas, we are making a difference. Finish What We Started, that's the title of the book, Finish What We Started, tells the story of the ordinary Americans driving this change, you and I, who they are and where they came from, what motivates them, and what their movement means for the survival of American democracy. Well, if wanting to get government out of your life, if wanting to have strong national security at the border and around the world, if wanting to deter countries like Russia and Iran and China, if wanting to restore our economy and get people back to work, if wanting to end medical persecution on our rights to not be jabbed by experimental mRNA serums, to not be persecuted for our Christian nationalism, if all of that is a threat to democracy, then I say good. We're coming for you then. It's the wrong word. We're coming for a damaged and broken country that has been run into the ground in no time flat by Biden and the Marxist Democrats and his overlords like Obama and all those people we don't see who are very much involved and engaged every day. So I actually urge you to go to Amazon or other book retailers and buy a copy of this book and give it a critical reading. Because if you can get past some of the bald-faced Democrat talking points, this book should be an inspiration as to how far we have come and where we have yet to go. We still have a job to do between now and November for the most important election, yes, I'll say it, of our lifetime. I want to thank you again with a humble heart for joining the Liberty Podcast, brought to us by Proven Arms and Outfitters right here in Moore County. We hope that you will join us again next time and urge all of your like-minded friends and even some that maybe just need a wake-up call to subscribe on YouTube and follow us. The Liberty Podcast. See you soon.